Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, where we combine the joy and excitement of traveling and aviation, along with something of an equal caliber of fun. A nerdy Asian guy wearing glasses explaining to you calculations in detail for 20 minutes at a time. Can I do another take? And now we have finally reached the grand finale of the Miles and Points miniseries. In part 1, I explained to you the two different kinds of miles, EQM and RDM, and in part 2, I told you the ways that you can potentially earn these miles, and in part 3, I taught you how you can calculate how many miles you're gonna earn for a particular flight. So now I can finally tell you how you can use all of the miles that you have understood, calculated, and earned. And of course, I will use a lot of terminologies that I will no longer explain since they have been previously explained in the first 3 parts. So if you have not watched those videos before, I highly recommend you take a look at the playlist right here on the top right corner. So without further ado, let's begin with the first, I would call the lowest value redemptions for your miles. These are what I call the external partnerships. These partnerships are, as the name suggests, third-party agreements that simply associate with the large client base of the airline's program in order to gain marketing value. So the airlines benefit almost very little from this kind of partnership other than some simple advertisements. So yeah, if you want to go through one of the most prominent partnerships through this way, such as the airline's shopping portal, you're almost always guaranteed to get a bad value. This is because the shops will try to charge the airlines near retail price for all of the goods and services that you purchase with the miles. So in turn, the airlines will come back and charge you as many miles as they can feasibly charge you so that they do not lose out too much on the money. And that resulted in some hilarious situation that if you want to buy a pair of Adidas shoes, it can potentially cost way more than a first class ticket. And thus, I almost never recommend my friends and family use their miles on the shopping portals because they are guaranteed to be a horrible value. And another really interesting case that can surprise a lot of people is that this is the exact same case with the airline's own travel portals. And this means that if you want to use your miles on redemption such as car rental, vacation packages, or even hotel bookings, you are guaranteed to get a horrible value. This is because running a large travel booking agencies such as Expedia or Orbitz have a huge overhead cost. So they actually outsource and externalize all of these costs to Expedia and other OTAs like this. So that in turn means that they almost have no control of the cost of the hotel bookings and the car rentals either. So sometimes you're gonna see that renting a car for nearly 3 days can potentially be worth more miles than simply flying across the ocean in first class. So yeah, this is another bad case of using the miles. So with all of these behind us, let's try to move on to something potentially a little bit higher value. Sitting one tier higher than those horrible redemptions is what I would call the airline's side hustles. These are external items that can potentially, the airlines can upsell you or upcharge you in order to get a better experience when you're flying. So one of the better examples is that a lot of the airlines who offer year-round pass for their lounges will try to sell their membership for cash. And some of these airlines will also try to sell them for an equivalent amount of miles. But surprisingly, after researching through a lot of these options, I found out that most of the airlines that actually do sell their membership with miles charge a ridiculously high amount of miles for that. So they have always been a really bad value to begin with. But on the other side, a little bit of a better are some of these onboard products or perhaps other externalized items that can potentially make your trip a lot more enjoyable. So what I'm talking about are, for example, Wi-Fi on board or premium dining options on board or some of the other options that they can offer to you so that you can travel more seamlessly. And one of the better uses that have been more meta these years is that you can use the miles on your Delta Club in order to redeem for some premium alcohol in the Delta lounges. But I do not recommend you waste too much time going down this rabbit hole, as the money, energy, and time can be potentially better spent elsewhere, such as upgrading with miles. So now we are finally up to the good stuff where you can get really good values out of your miles, and surprise, surprise, these are the things that the airlines can actually control their cost on, which is flying. And to upgrade with miles, it can potentially be extremely confusing, but that confusion can be rewarded if you can figure out how you can deal with it. So one of the biggest hurdles of upgrading with miles is that every single program has a completely different policies. One of the better examples is British Airways Avios. So their policy of upgrading is that you simply pay the difference in the redemption chart of the class you want to upgrade from, into the class you want to upgrade into. And that can be really good value, because if you want to take a look of British Airways redemption chart, you can see that from business class to first class, you almost always only have to pay 30% extra in terms of miles. And if you want to look up the cash rates, you almost always have to pay 3 to even 10 times more in terms of cash in order to upgrade. So of course, upgrading using British Airways Avios is almost always guaranteed to be an outsized value. But before we move on to the best use of your miles, I want to introduce you to some rather interesting usages. Some of the uses that you can potentially spend your miles on are so comical that I have to outline them here in a separate section. And one of the most prominent examples is that you can basically transfer your miles to the friends and family. And that makes perfect sense, right? If your friend is short for 50,000 miles, you should be able to transfer your excess miles into his or her account so that you can give the gift of travel. But no, that's where the airlines get you. They usually try to advertise it as one of the uses of your miles, but they are so ridiculously bad in terms of value that he or she, your friend, might just be better off buying the miles himself or herself. Why? Well, let me try to explain. The airlines will always try to charge you a percentage, a relatively high percentage, let me mind you that, of a fee that resulted in a lose-lose scenario for you and your friend. So it is almost always, actually, I would say it is always, a very, very bad value, because your friend or family can directly just buy the miles from the airlines themselves, and they can potentially get a better deal than that. So of course, this is a ridiculously bad idea. And another really interesting idea, which I would not say is bad, is that you can donate your miles before they expire or before you decide to leave a program for good. But the problem is that the airlines value them so low. If you donate 50,000 miles, they are basically giving a few pennies to the charity that you choose. So I would say that if you really have no other use for your miles and they're either expiring or you just simply do not want to deal with the evil corporations themselves, you might as well just donate them. That can be a good use of your miles. But now finally, we are onto the real good stuff. Let's see how redeeming airplane tickets can be a very good deal if you know how to use your miles properly. First up, redeeming miles on economy class flights. According to the airline's own internal documents, a vast majority of the miles and points are redeemed on short domestic economy flights. And let me tell you, it is not a very good idea. Well, what is that? This is because back in the good old days of 2016, a lot of the airlines still have a standard award chart that is strictly adhered to, so it doesn't matter how much the cash rate for a specific flight is going for, you can almost always try to get a ticket on that same flight using miles that are significantly less, for example, on Easter weekends or perhaps on Christmas, right? Because the cash tickets are going ridiculously high due to demand, but as long as there are empty seats on certain award categories, you can still get them for the standard low price, right? But in recent years, almost all of the programs have gone semi-dynamic pricing. That means that even if they have seats available, they will try to adjust it based upon, the actual cash rate that they are selling on the market. So you are almost never getting a good value on economy flights. And that is especially true if we take in the valuation of the miles. I've mentioned it many times in this video, so it is time for me to formally teach you how to calculate how much the miles you're paying is worth. So to start, we need to figure out how much each mile is worth. And a good place to start is actually on the Points Guy blog site. They have a monthly update of every single major program, either in hotels or airlines. So you can get the rough idea of how much each mile is worth. But of course, since they are a large corporation owned by an even larger corporation, that kind of just makes their valuation a bit too high, right? So we need to take another 20% off their valuation, which for me personally should be about roughly enough. But if you are more stringent on your budget, you should take another 15% off. So now we get the valuation of each point. We need to multiply it by how many miles the airlines are charging you, so you kind of get a rough idea of how much cash value you're spending with your miles redemption. And then if you compare it with the real cash tickets, you can find out that for economy class, almost always you will get a bad deal. So it is almost never worth it to buy a mile mileage ticket when you can just get a cash ticket and you can earn miles on the top of that, so you actually get some miles back. It's really 90% of the time I would say that it is a bad deal of redeeming miles on economy class. And the rest 10% of the time can be, for example, a route that is consistently very expensive, but the mileage ticket is usually a little bit lower than that, or perhaps it is a specific flight that you have to fly for a family emergency, or you have to attend a wedding this place, or something that you basically have no negotiating power with. So that can potentially still be a little bit of a savior, a silver lining in a time of distress. So all of these are still pretty bad value, so let's try to move on to something that is basically the pinnacle, or perhaps the gold standard of mileage redemption: business class. If you have been around the travel hacking sphere and have read a blog or two or a review or two, you're gonna know that almost all of the travel hackers, as well as bloggers, will try to tell you that you should always use your miles on redemptions in business class and first class. Well, there's a good reason for that. Well, if you pull up the Alaska Airlines award chart from North America into Oceania and the South Pacific, you're gonna find out that almost all of the options have economy as well as business. But for business class, it is usually just 30 to 40% more expensive than economy, while if you go and try to buy it with cash, you're gonna find out that almost all of the business class go for quintuple, sextuple, or even 10 times more expensive than the cash ticket in economy. And this is why, because by booking business class and first class using miles, you are getting an extremely outsized value compared to using cash. So for example, if you want to buy a ticket in economy, it costs $500, and if you go into the miles, it should be costing you about $700 worth of miles. It is not a good deal. But suddenly, if you want to go for business class, while the cash rates might be going for $3,500, you only pay for $1,100 worth of miles in terms of the program, and suddenly it can be a good deal to use the miles. And in fact, this might be the only semi-consistent way of getting outsized value in all of these redemptions. And if you are not really short on cash, or you don't have to go on a very specific flight, this is the best use of your miles and should be the only use of your miles. However, one downside of booking business class travel is that it takes quite a lot of research and energy. This is because a lot of the airlines know a lot of people are trying to basically maximize their value of the miles, and they will try to make it as difficult as possible for you. You know, they're greedy corporations after all. So you need to be very flexible in terms of your booking. Perhaps depart from a nearby city, or perhaps just be flexible in destination altogether. If you want to go to any city in Australia, you should be able to find one on your desired dates. So it is really important for you to try to figure out what kind of strategy you're going for when you're trying to redeem your miles, especially in business class, because you're basically wrestling with a multi-billion-dollar industry. And that is why booking tickets in business class can be a really good idea. But then you must be thinking, right? Should I just move on to first class and skip business class together because that can be even better value? Sure, theoretically it is, right? If you pull up any award redemption chart, you're gonna find out that first class is merely about 30 to 40% extra on business class. And as I mentioned before, usually first class go for even higher, 10 times or even 15 times higher than business class. So that can really be a good idea if you want to actually truly maximize the value of your miles. But here's the catch, right? First class is getting rarer and rarer every day. A lot of the airlines have simply phased out first class altogether. And then among those of the last few airlines that are still running first class, they basically just have made redemption impossible. A good example might be Air France. Air France is really famous for its ridiculously over-the-top first class, and they can retail for 5 digits easily. But if you want to actually enjoy this kind of really nice fine dining, you're gonna find out that you not only have to have miles with Air France's own Flying Blue program, but you also need to be a high-tier elite member, and then you have to shell out really high amount of miles in order to redeem that. So actually, most of the times, first class are simply just unicorn status. It is impossible to redeem. You'll be very hard pressed to even find one single first class available for partner redemption even 350 days in advance. So I really do not recommend you wasting your energy to try to chase down the unicorn that potentially do not even exist. So yeah, first class, good idea. But if a blog site is constantly shelling out their credit cards and tell you that you can book your first class for 70,000 miles, you know they are probably lying to themselves as well. So now we have climbed to the peak of a mountain. We have figured out the most valuable uses of your miles, which is using it mostly on business class. But actually there is something more. So you see, a lot of the award charts are designed by people who basically have not too many clues of all of the partners they have, because it is truly impossible, right? Because only the crowd can figure out the best use of the miles if an airline has almost 24 partners. So you can redeem your miles on so many partners, there's bound to be something that they're gonna miss. And indeed, there are sometimes that something that they think, would not be worth too much to the people, but actually it is extremely valuable. These are called sweet spots. And you can potentially earn the best value of your miles by using these on some hyper sweet points that you can find online or potentially in some really niche discussions in Flyer Talk forums. And one of the best examples is the relatively less used 26,000 points on Czech Airways using Etihad Airlines own program. Somehow the chart says that you can redeem 26,000 points on a business class flight for nearly 10 hours from Prague into Seoul on Czech Airways, even though that might be even too low for the price of an economy ticket. So hopefully you have learned something new about using the miles in this really complicated game. And then the main takeaway is that, of course, try to redeem it for business class and first class travel whenever possible, and try to avoid all of the other usages that the airlines are trying to let you waste and squander all of your miles away, because that is the ultimate goal they want. They want to advertise on their high redemption things and then later just try to convince you to waste them away for almost worthless things. And then this also draws a close to all of the Miles and Points miniseries. I hope you have enjoyed this entire series so far, and then if you did, please consider clicking the like button beneath me. It would really help me out. And if you have not subscribed yet, I would highly encourage you to subscribe as well, because I will post a lot of interesting things in my community tabs from time to time. Whenever I find a ridiculously cheap deal, you can get a really nice idea of how good travel hacking can be sometimes. And then if you want to check out some of the other travel hacking videos, you can also check out some of these ones listed here. They are really good, trust me. And then, oh yeah, I'll see you around in a different series.